Hi, Elizabeth. So great to have you on the show. We're thrilled to have you as our guest today because our show is all about empowering women to advance in leadership. And you have this incredible success story and a track record of so many accomplishments. So I can't wait to share with our audience all of your journey and lessons learned throughout. So, welcome.
Thank you, Nikki. It's wonderful to see you and connect, and thank you for including me.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. Let's start with your formation story. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, those early days and whether you knew what you wanted to be.
Sure, sure. So I grew up in Bombay. I still call it Bombay or Mumbai, India, as it's called. And I was the middle child of three girls. And I say this because I grew up in a fairly patriarchal, conservative environment. And my parents were both scientists. They worked for a BARC, which is kind of like a Los Alamos of India. And the one thing that they really taught me was the importance of working hard, doing your best work every day, and really paying it forward. Because I think when you grow up in a large metropolis like Bombay, there's so much disparity around you.
Hmm.
You have to become conscious of your privilege or luck, or just the fact that you have a chance to gain an education, and that thread of really giving back and paying it forward, I think, defined a lot of my experiences as a child, and also I think defined who I am as a professional. So my mother is a nuclear chemist. I'm very
Wow.
proud of her. Back in the 60s, she was one of the few women in India to do pioneering work, setting up some public-private partnerships. She was a great role model. She raised three girls while doing her PhD.
Wow.
And I think that work ethic, which, it was not easy. It was not easy to just keep forging forward, focusing, paying it back, and then really kind of engaging in helping the community. I think are lessons I saw, and seeing all the time that it's not easy to do those things,
Hmm.
but still wanting to do them because they're the
Right.
right thing to do. So I think those are the things that kind of defined me a lot.
So you had your mom as a role model who showed what it meant to, pursue your vision and your ambition and also raise a family and what it takes in terms of the work ethic, the sacrifices and the focus to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And I think in addition to that, also that responsibility to work,
Mm,
because other people have done things for you. We all stand on
mm,
their shoulders, right?
right.
So you really want to make sure you are enabling that platform for other people going forward. So
Yeah.
I think that, and that's, it's a good message to kind of hold on to as I've traversed through
Mm.
professional life, both in India and the US.
So that's wonderful about your, learning from your mom and having a role model right at home. How did that early upbringing then kind of shape your perspective on what you wanted to be when you grew up, and your academic choices? You've got tremendous, impressive education. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that's a really good question. And I think some of my academic choices were actually defined by failure. And I'll
Oh.
explain why. In the sense that I was a good student, but I had always expected to become a doctor.
Mm,
And because that's what good girls in India do.
yes.
And I actually did not have the marks to make it into medicine. So that was pretty significant setback early on in my life, because I had
Mm,
a mission, I had a purpose I was working towards. And I think, like everything else, it taught me that sometimes the path you think you should be on or you plan for is not necessarily the right path, and you can
mhm.
do much more in another direction. So when I did my master's from Tata Institute, which is an institute in Bombay, um, the education that was in through the management degree that we got was very much purpose driven, very much socially
Mm,
driven. And I think some of those lessons I learned in that new path that I took, after really overcoming, as a teenager, when you don't get what you expect to get or learn from, it makes you reflect on how do you then navigate, right? What next? So I
mhm.
think in hindsight, those failures were actually really good for me, because they
Right.
made me seek more purpose and find how I really wanted to contribute in different ways, not the ways I expected to, but in ways maybe were more meaningful and useful to everybody else.
Yeah, that's
So
so true because no matter what failure leads you to, you can always find success in that new path if you have an open mind and continue to learn and grow in that. Given the career choices or the academic choices that you made since then, how did your career then unfold, throughout the various corporate roles you've held and rising up within the corporations?
sure. So, as I always think about, like when you craft a path, you make a plan, you make a list, and then you have to be ready to throw it away, right? And start afresh or take a different direction. So instead of following a career in science, I ended up taking up a career in corporate life in the human resources, which was chosen for a reason because I thought
Mhm,
that was a way to, add meaning and value and purpose to corporate life, because I was also observing that corporates were becoming powerful entities. And, growing up in India, the role of the government is very
mhm,
significant, but that was slowly shifting as liberalization
mhm,
was, being uncovered. And I did realize early on that corporates have a responsibility, they have the ability to really integrate across national boundaries and,
mhm,
drive change in ways that maybe, regional local governments could not. So to that extent, the, fact of choosing HR as the area I specialized in was purposeful and kind of aligned to what I was observing in the market.
mhm,
And then, I moved to the United States as an expatriate in the late 90s. My company moved me here. I, came here with very little and with lots of assumptions around, or met lots of assumptions around, who I was or who I was
mhm.
supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. Much like growing up in India, as a
Yeah,
woman in India, you are expected to do
yeah.
certain things, and you choose to or you do not, depending on your internal compass. So I think, through my life in corporate India and corporate America, I did learn that it was really, really important to be the author of your own potential, of your own
Mm,
capability, and to be the single author in the sense that, you take lots of advice, you talk to lots of people, but, you define what you're capable of.
mm,
You need to author what you think you want to do, and, how you're going to do it. And I think
mhm,
that lesson is something that is really, important. Even as I talk to my daughters, right? It's really important to think about who you are, what you want to be, and not be, I mean, be influenced, but, choose, make the choice yourself.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a powerful statement to be the author of your own story. And I'm curious, you alluded to the idea of, being lucky and having the good fortune of opportunity. Why is that? I mean, what shaped you in recognizing your ability to have opportunities that perhaps other women in India at the time did not have access to?
So that's a really good question. That's a big question, Nikki,
Yeah.
right? So, and I think
Well, were
it's
there some pivotal stories or, incidents that sort of made you aware of that? And I ask that because so often we don't fully recognize, even in our own set of challenges, that there's much to be grateful for until you recognize someone else that doesn't have what you already have.
absolutely, you're so right. You're so right. And, and I said it was a big question because I think there's two intersections to it. I think one is the aspect of, candidly, family values. And,
Mm,
my parents were very conscious of what was around them. And they did, infuse that to us in many different ways, that sense of responsibility.
mhm,
That, whatever you have, it's a lot, right?
mhm,
So it may not be a lot, but it is a
yeah.
lot. It's enough, and you can give, you can share. So I think there's that part of it. I think the second part of it is, being awake and being aware of what's around you. And I think that always creates gratitude, no matter where you are, whether you're in India or in, in New York City, right behind me. If you're aware to what's around you, you will see that you have enough and you have
Mhm,
something to give. And I think from my perspective, when I was, growing up in Mumbai in India, I encountered, several issues of where lack of access to opportunities made a big difference in not just your life, but in the life of multiple generations. So the
mm,
impact of those disparities are multi-generational.
mhm,
and I was, and I write about this in the book that's coming out in April. I had a classmate in middle school who got married when she was 15, and part of the reason she chose it and it was chosen for her was because of that access to education, or
Mm,
the access to feeling that even if you don't have a great set of grades, you have other opportunities, right?
mhm,
So it made very clear to me early on that if you have opportunity of any kind, you are privileged. And
mhm,
there are many people who don't have those opportunities, and if we can find a way to link arms and make sure more people have access to what they need, whatever that might be,
mhm.
so how much better would we be as a community, as a global community?
Absolutely. And that access to opportunity, sometimes not even being aware that that is possible, often shapes the perspective and the worldview you have and the choices you end up with. And you and I have a lot of similar experiences, having grown up in India and coming to the United States at roughly about the same timeline. We're fortunate, like the life we've been able to create, the opportunities we've had. But take us back to those early days when you were first, out here. What kind of limiting beliefs or fears did you experience? What was that like?
I was very cognizant of what the privilege that I did come in with.
Yeah.
Like I had, I wasn't coming in with nothing. I mean, but I was starting afresh, completely, reinventing myself. And I think some of the challenges were practical, and some of them were, mental, both mine and others, right?
Mhm.
And I remember this, funny episode. It's very funny now, but it was terrifying at that moment. I had just landed in Southern California, and I was trying to set up my phone connection, and I was on the line with somebody from Southern Bell, I believe that was the company that had the landlines. And the lady at the end of the line could not follow me because I had an accent. And honestly, I couldn't follow her because she had a heavy Southern accent. And, I'm coming in assuming that I speak English, I write it well. And I had this terrifying moment when I realized that I was incomprehensible to somebody. And it's funny now, but at that moment, I remember thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Like, lady can't even understand what I'm saying. Now, over the years, I've learned how to manage that, how to listen better, how to
Yeah.
speak more slowly, right? Things I've
Mm,
had to do to make that shift and accept that.
mm,
And, I remember another incident when I was traveling on work and I had no credit card because I didn't have credit history. So my company had booked me into a hotel, and kind of, I think they guaranteed the, payment or something like that. And I show up there late at night, and they basically wouldn't give me a room because I didn't have a credit card. So, I'm a woman in a city in the middle of the night and thinking, what am I going to do? Where am I going to stay? So I think some of those practical challenges of starting afresh, definitely taught me about um, realizing that it takes a lot to build a life. It takes
mhm,
a lot for people who come with a lot less than I have to build a life, right? So if you kind of reflect on some of the challenges that I think all of us face in our daily life, it I think always will remind you, yes, I had that challenge, but
mhm,
I also had the privilege to be able to call somebody and
mhm.
have them put their credit card in
Right.
and get a hotel room that night instead of sleeping on the park bench.
Yeah.
So, and so those are just a couple of things I experienced, and I think from a mental construct or um, framework perspective, I think there are lots of cultural nuances when you start afresh. The way you write,
Mhm,
something as simple as lots of people who write in colonial English write
mm,
in the passive voice, and corporate America writes in the active voice. You start with a verb, and even small things like not knowing to do that make a big impact in your perceived competence or your perceived success. And I do remember this because it was the kindness of a friend who gave me a very simple tip. She said, Elizabeth, write your sentences in active voice. And start with a verb on every bullet. It was a very simple thing, and it made a huge difference. And I always remember that lesson from my friend Erin, who, if she ever listens to this, will know. But I think those kinds of practical things, which you don't know what you don't know what's valued in a different cultural construct, are
Mhm.
things I think, again, remind you to be more empathetic when
Mhm.
you encounter people who are, everyone's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
They're all coming from different, they all have different pieces of information to navigate. So I think if we can all reflect upon the things we didn't know, I think it makes you a much better a better co-worker, a better collaborator, right? Because
Yeah.
you understand their journeys too.
That, yeah, I can relate to everything you're sharing, including the passive to active voice, because I had to go through the same thing myself. And much like you, there was a very kind friend who helped me realize how to, communicate in, I guess, the American colloquial voice. And but it really highlights so much of what it takes in terms of stepping into uncertainty and newness, much like what we've experienced over the past year with COVID. When the future is uncertain and you don't have the traditional things that you rely on, for your guardrails are no longer existent. You have to rely on conviction within yourself and ask for help and give yourself grace as you learn and adapt through that. So much of our immigrant journeys are so much of the same kind. I think it also helps you take more risks in that, as you look forward. So, what are, as you look at like how some of those experiences shaped you, um, tell us about sort of, the mindset of stepping into bigger opportunity, taking risks to advance in your career, and what guidance would you give to our listeners to, to recognize that is a necessary part of success and advancement?
So, a couple of things. I think that when we um, are navigating in corporate life or, academic life, or, in our professional careers, we're always at the receiving end of so much input, especially nowadays, right? There's information, there's best practices, there's papers, there's opinions about who you are and what you should be doing. And I think what's really important, there are three things. One is you have to look inward, you have to reflect inward. The second is you have to be honest about what you need. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit. And I think the third part of it is, you have to be the author.
Mm,
So when you think about the first aspect of looking inward, you have to constantly reflect on what you're learning and your experiences. You're not going to wake up one day, spend 10 minutes with your journal and then know, right? It's that epiphany is, it may happen, but it's a constant journey because that answer keeps changing on a day-to-day
mm,
basis, right? You might have it all figured out and then COVID hits and then all your assumptions go away.
yeah.
So I think that aspect of looking inward is really important and being honest with yourself. I know I'm not going to be, a quantum scientist. I don't have that capability, right?
Mhm,
So I think you also have to be honest about, okay, what is it that you can do well and you want to do well? What are your motivations?
mhm,
Are you here for a paycheck? Are you trying to, drive meaning into work? Are you trying to, define the future of work, right? Which is part of what, how are you going to be using your voice for your
mm,
mission, and be very, very honest and intentional about it.
mhm,
And I think the third part of it is, just as I mentioned before, being that single author of your destiny, of your choices, of defining your capability. I think growing up in India in a very conservative environment, a lot of what I experienced was, expectations of what you're expected to do, right?
mm,
So I think what I've learned to be is very conscious about the choices you're making. Are you making them because you want them, or are they expected of you?
mm,
And how do they tie into, your inner North Star? How do they tie into who you are as a person and who you want to be as a person? And those are, messages I tell my girls every day. I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old who are navigating to be teens in this world of social media. So it's very important to, keep close to your purpose,
mhm.
because there'll be many days when you doubt yourself and other people will doubt you. But if you know who you are and what you're here for and what you want to leave with, it does make a big difference.
That's powerfully put. Thank you for sharing that. Um, you know, as you you're someone who's at the forefront of, defining things for the future of work, and, really looking at how it impacts people and talent and culture. Give us sort of a 30,000-foot view of, as an expert and a thought leader in that space. Give us some guidance around what people should be thinking about, as they're looking at their careers in the context of future of work, and how to thrive and how to be effective in that. What skill set, what mindset is necessary to be effective in that?
So there are, three big forces really at play right now. So one is the force of technology, right? Technology, if you can imagine it, technology can make it happen. So
Mhm.
that's one, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The second aspect of it is people and humanity at the center of everything.
Mm.
And I'll, so the human intention, the human purpose, the human skill set has to be at the core. And I mentioned technology first because it's actually not as important as the person and the human at the second part of it. And I think the third big force that, we're working on and observing is actually the aspect of space exploration. And
Mm.
that those three forces are really going to transform a lot of the work that we'll be doing in the future of work. So I'll kind of go back to the number two, which is, the person at the heart of it, right? So as you think about these two forces at the side, there's technology, there's, space exploration. And I use space exploration as an analogy to really describe all the potential, all the possibilities that are out there. So technology is going to enable that
Mhm.
with the human at the heart of it. So
Mhm.
thinking about, how an individual needs to navigate through these forces, through these disruptions, is going to be our North Star in the future of work. When I say our, the big R as a global community. And we're finding that as individuals are, navigating through the world of work that's changing, the skills and capabilities that they're bringing to the table are going to be the central definition of who they are.
Mhm.
And by the use of technology like blockchain and AI, we are going to be, democratizing access to skills, democratizing access to opportunities, ensuring that people, whether they're in India, where I grew up, right, or Africa, or in rural communities anywhere in the world, are able to access those same kinds of opportunities and skills and capabilities through the power of technology, through the platforms of AI and blockchain, which will provide provenance and information and authentication of data. So you're not constrained by your location or the
Mhm.
fact that you didn't go to college or you didn't go to Harvard. Those things are going to be less important than the fact that you're bringing skills and capabilities to the table.
Mhm.
Um, and then when you think about, where we are with space exploration, the fact that much like the internet in the old days, right? Every company has become, has an internet component.
Mhm.
Similarly, every company will have a space component. And this is a little further out there than I think we've been having in our public discourse around corporate life. But some of those implications around, things we would learn from collaborating in virtual environments, collaborating in space are very going to be very material and germane to how we collaborate virtually,
Mhm.
because the world is going to become more virtual, and your geographical location is already becoming, fairly irrelevant, as we've seen through COVID.
Yeah,
Can be a
that
very
is fantastic, because you painted a picture of the future, especially as someone who is that futurist. You're helping our audience understand, what context should they use in looking at the future, and how do they place themselves to ride that wave as opposed to being disrupted by it, right? So let's take it one step further now to say, okay, with so much change, the magnitude of change and the pace of change is significant. How do I, as an individual, develop my skills or competencies when everything around me is changing so fast that I can't keep up? What do you think is the most valuable skill for anyone to develop in this context?
That's a really good question. So I think the most valuable skill or capability or muscle we can all develop is actually one of unlearning.
Mm,
And and I see, purposely saying, I'm not saying learning, it's about unlearning, because
yeah.
the pace of change is going to be so rapid. And sometimes I tell people, savor this second you're in, because this is going to be the slowest. Life is going to be. Every moment after this is faster, right?
Right.
So that pace of acceleration in life and business disruption is so rapid. The skills and capabilities you need are going to constantly evolve. So for
Mhm.
that reason, your ability to unlearn and accept new input, accept new requirements, is actually going to be your most important life skill, really. We're finding in the work that I've been doing, over the past 5 years, many of the skills and capabilities that are deemed critical today, like take blockchain, for example, over a third of those were completely, unknown about 5 to 6 years ago. You couldn't take a class on blockchain, but, we're finding that's becoming very important. And, for people like me, I have a middle schooler, as I mentioned, when she reaches, finishes college, over 65% of the jobs that she'll be looking to, probably take up don't exist today. They're going to be
Mhm.
completely new and created. So that ability to kind of let go of your old constructs or paradigms about, what I should do, how I should do it, uh, and accept new ideas is going to be the key to survival and thriving.
Survival and build a more inclusive world, not just a more innovative world. Because if we can shed our biases and our prejudice and our preconceived notions, not just to learn new skills, but also to accept people that have different perspectives, I think it would certainly build a kinder world around us. Um, as you are in very senior HR and talent development roles, and as you think about preparing that talent for the future, and specifically you look at women in the workplace, share some insight into what you found more from a research and data perspective of some of the barriers that hold women back, and specifically what advice would you give to our audience in overcoming those barriers.
So I think the reality for women is that, it's not easy, right? And this is true for, other marginalized groups as well, right?
Mhm.
Adulting is not easy, right? And being a woman in the corporate life, corporate world is not easy. So I think the first thing is to kind of acknowledge that, right? And, early on in my career, and even sometimes today, I have moments of disappointment when people don't do the right thing,
Mhm.
or they don't do what I hope they would do or expect they do. But,
Mhm.
that's reality. You have to be very pragmatic about the world you're navigating in, because I think what that does is it kind of takes away that emotion out of it, right? It makes
Mhm.
it very factual. So I think that's the first part of it. I think the second part of it is, doing that, going with your gut. So I would say, as you're making your decisions, sleep over it, wake up in the morning and go with your gut. But in the year leading up to that, you should have done the work,
Mm.
right? To think about it, talk to the people, learn. And I think it goes back to the idea of unlearning, right?
Mhm.
Listen, open your mind to ideas, talk to people you respect, and people who may have made choices that you didn't agree with. Both are important, because they'll give you a sense of, what their motivations might be. It might teach you what you do not want to do, right?
Mhm.
So that aspect of being open and unlearning your ideas of what you think may be right, and being open to that internal that input, I think is really the most powerful technique that women can adopt, because I think we're naturally open to that, right? I mean, I think we typically seek information. We're, most of the women I work with are looking for, trying to learn more and gather more data. So I think those two things would really be helpful. And then I think the other aspect of it is, being, I go back to the theme of being your own author, right? So there's one part of self-determination and
Mhm.
knowing what is it that you seek. I think the other part of it is, when you are an author, you write about, right? You speak about what you believe in, what you're passionate about. So I think sharing that excitement about the work you're doing, talking about it, giving people your ideas or share, providing that, being open to it, I think makes a big difference, because that gives you access to leadership. If you're setting up a meeting to tell them about the work you're doing or how excited you are about this opportunity, it also kind of pivots the conversation. So it kind of makes it um, more of a collaboration approach where somebody is also able to learn from you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, as kind of women think about the need to be pragmatic, acknowledge the challenges that they might have,
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to really decipher their own message, whatever that message is, and then use that
Share that
message and
message.
share that over and over again. I
Yeah.
think would be really important.
And your own career journey is a phenomenal reflection of exactly that, being very clear about your North Star, being pragmatic and owning your voice and sharing that message, which really positions you as a subject matter expert and an influential thought leader, not just someone who's good at doing their job, but is actually driving change beyond their role and beyond their organization. Which, a lot of times there's this concern that it might be bragging or self promotion, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But, you know, how have you seen that, where the typical hesitation why someone is afraid to put their point of view out there? What has helped you sort of own that and not be limited by, expressing yourself?
That's a really, really good question, right? Because, and I'll be honest with you, when somebody asked me to, write something, be part of a book, my first instinct was, oh my God, that would seem like, uh, so immodest, or, putting your word out there, right? So I think that naturally comes to us because, we operate under the construct that what we have to share is not always valuable, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's something to acknowledge. I think the other part of it is, when you're, and I say this to my teams because I'm in consulting, we sell ideas, we sell solutions. It's really not about selling, it's about helping. So I
Hmm.
think when you think about the work you're doing, and I truly believe it is, if your purpose is to help, it is to make other people, get to a better outcome. I think that makes you more purposeful in what you share. It makes you more authentic in, why you're doing something.
Hmm.
It pivots the locus from to from yourself, to them, the person you're trying to help. So I think it's really important, to think about the purpose, the why of what you're doing,
Hmm.
and kind of anchor that to your purpose as an individual, right? So
Hmm.
what you're doing in your professional role, how that's going to help people, and when you put those two things together, I think it gives you a real voice, a voice that is authentic, not because of just what you're saying, but why you're saying it and why you're speaking up. And I think that is transformational for yourself, and also for any conversation you're in. So I think that's kind of how I've tried to navigate.
Yeah.
um,
So reframing it from self promotion to service, because you can't help someone if they don't even know you or what you do or how that's helpful to them. So being able to express that gives you a bigger platform to make a difference.
That's right. That's right. And I was heavily influenced early in the years, in my early professional years, by the writings of Jim Collins and The
Mhm.
Servant Leader. And
Yeah.
I truly, truly believe that, because, in leadership, and we're all leaders, right? No matter what role we are in our families and our communities, we're all leaders. And if you can pivot your purpose to be serving, to helping other people, and to be enabling, I think it makes for a very different conversation and outcome. So I think I try to do that, and you still will have self doubt, but if you're saying, hey, I'm doing this because I can help this person,
Mhm.
I think it's a better outcome.
Excellent. So let's pivot a little bit to home life and how you've managed an extraordinary career and lots of global responsibilities with home and being a mom and all of that, and what has worked and perhaps even some challenges that you've faced or continue to face.
So I think, for someone who didn't really consider myself as I'm going to go out and say this, as a woman in terms of my role, right? Because I think growing up in India, I had a lot of expectations around the role of what a woman is supposed to do. I had role models who did that and did more. Eventually, I think I really started thinking of myself as a person, right? Not as, which I think we all are, but not as a woman, right? In the professional life. So I never was conscious of well, I mean, conscious, but that was my operating model was as a person with something to contribute, not
Yes.
as a woman. So that was just my way of navigating and making sense of all these different expectations
Mhm.
I think when I became a mother, and I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old, I think it um, changed that perspective quite a bit, in that I started seeing that very candidly as my primary identity,
Mm.
um, because I think part of this is, they say like your children are not your own, right? They're the gift from the universe to give back. I did see that role as a parent to kind of enable them, right? So I think for that reason, I do see my primary identity as a mother, and I think to that extent, everything I do in my work is also geared towards this larger purpose I have, right?
Mhm.
So keeping all of that in mind, I know that's a lot, but I'm just being very candid here. It's not been easy because my children had some health issues. As you're traveling and working in consulting, all of these things become compounding factors, right? The
Mhm.
exponential effect of each of the challenges we face are pretty significant.
Mhm.
I have a spouse who has a pretty intense job too, so we're kind of in a dual career household, managing through all the things that have to be done, whether it's play dates or doctor's appointments, or making sure that somebody needs to have 5 golden coins
Yeah.
for a party tomorrow afternoon, right? And find out at 10 o'clock at night. So there are those, I think those challenges are real. They're, like every other parent has. Um, I think the way I've navigated is, one is to accept when I needed the help. I've asked for a lot of help. I've taken a lot of help. I've been lucky. I've had family and the ability to have help through that process of raising my kids. And I think the second part of it is really not forgetting the purpose of even why I work, right? Or it is linked to that in a North Star. If you know why you're doing something, I think striking the balance in the moment, because the balance changes every day, right?
Mhm.
You may have the perfect balance and somebody falls ill, or you may have the perfect balance and you have to drive home from Philly to New York every day because you don't want to leave the kids alone at night, right?
Mhm.
And you do that, and I've done that. So I think those kinds of aspects of kind of recognizing that the balance changes,
Mhm.
seeking help, and seeking why internally why we do the things we do are really what help you keep all of those multiple priorities that we're all juggling in
Yeah.
balance, one at a time.
And what is given all of that, there's always multiple balls up in the air, and you have to do the best you can within that, because there's no such thing as perfect balance of 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, and 8 hours of fun. For any high achiever, it's making choices of what's most important at that point in time. How have you prioritized self-care, and what is perhaps a daily or weekly sort of habit or ritual that has helped you?
Some days it's that cup of coffee, some days it's getting a run in Central Park, right? And then
Yeah.
I've done my self-care. Some days it's maybe working out with my girlfriend. So I think the answer changes a little bit every day. The key is to find that moment that you're able to find gratitude around
Mm,
amidst the multiple things that you're trying to prioritize. And the answer is, at least for me, it's a different answer every day, but you still have to seek and find it.
that is wonderful. Well, as we wrap up this interview, I want to have you share maybe a final words of advice or a parting, pearl of wisdom with our audience. As what is the biggest thing that you want to leave everyone with?
So I think it's really, those three things which I have um, spent my time thinking about as I've tried to navigate. I
Mm,
think it's the aspect of, be your own author, be conscious, be intentional about, you know, how you're defining your potential, because anybody can do anything if they put their mind and focus to it. So, choose wisely, choose yourself to be the author.
mm,
That's the first thing. I think the second part of it is, reflecting on an ongoing basis, because as the pace of the world and work changes, the answer is going to change every day. The
mm.
answer to how you might get self-care will change every day. So reflect daily and, find that answer, and it may be a different answer, and embrace that. And I think the third part of it is, really be to thine own self, be true.
Mhm.
Keep that north star of who you are and your purpose, and why you do the work you do central to everything, because that is transformational for yourself. It helps you find meaning. It helps you give meaning to others. And I think, that's probably what I tell my kids too. So
Well, thank you. This has been incredible. Appreciate you sharing not only your stories, but also the strategies that have worked for you and providing the context about the future of work and all the impending challenges, and how, in that context of disruptive and rapid change, it's even more important for us to go inward and be truthful with ourselves and be reflective and discover our own voice and author our own story. So, thank you so much for being on the show, and we wish you all the very best for the future, and look forward to having our audience learn from this.
thank you so much, Nikki. This was wonderful. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity.